Senate Foreign Relations Committee will come to order. This hearing of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, the subject is the AI revolution, and I look forward to our testimony from our witnesses. As I think most members know, our leadership, including with Senator Young, have been busy setting up a college for us to learn AI. We appreciate it very much. We're getting continuing Senate credits for our attendance at the AI conferences. So thank you, Senator Young, for your leadership in putting that together. This is, this is just another opportunity for the role that the Foreign Relations Committee will play in regards to what is our appropriate policies as it relates to AI. The AI revolution is going to change economics, it's going to change societies, it's going to change the entire world. That means it's also going to change the way we do diplomacy. Today's advanced AI models are 5 billion times more powerful than just a decade ago. That's 5 billion times. The kind of technology growth is unlike anything humans have ever invented. And we are still just at the early stages of AI revolution. It has the potential to usher in unpredictable, complicated challenges, like empowering digital authoritarianism, or spreading bias and disinformation, or locking us into a spiraling AI race against our adversaries. At the same time, the AI revolution will bring about positive possibilities unseen in human history, predicting the outbreak of war, improving harvests to solve food security, curing deadly diseases, unlocking green energy. So I want to thank our witnesses for appearing before us today. I know you and your team face challenges. Preparing the world to responsibly harness and deploy AI will be difficult. Preparing the Department of State for the future won't be easy either. I want to thank you for the accomplishments you have advanced so far and for the heroic efforts that you're engaging in. Your dedication and commitment in serving our nation is appreciated. Your teams include some of the sharpest minds in our government. That is why I want to challenge you to do even more. Thus far, much of the discussions around AI is centered around the military and private sector. But making money or making war is too narrow of an approach for the AI revolution. We need to proceed with an AI agenda that is wrapped in American values. That is why I think the State Department is not only crucial to this effort, the State Department must be a leader in global AI governance efforts. The State Department has valuable data. That data has not always been well organized or used to its fullest potential. This includes real-time information from embassies and diplomats stationed around the world. It includes the UN voting records. It includes environmental and economic trends. This is highly valuable information. We know how much we are trying to gather information today and how valuable that is for the private sector. State needs to unlock the insights from this novel data, and you have the workforce to do just that. The department has concentrated of public servants who have with advanced degrees and go beyond foreign policy. Your data science experts are going to be vital in this effort. Our diplomats also must be involved as we manage our AI competition with nations like China and Russia. Diplomats know how to take on complex and multifaceted problems. They know how to balance competing ideas when making policy. And most importantly, American diplomats know how to drive an agenda based on American values. Values that need to be part of the AI revolution. Values that protect people's privacy. Values that lead to democratic elections, respect for human rights, and peace and security for people around the world. If we're going to lead on global AI governance, if we're going to avoid dangerous AI arms race, if we're going to harness AI to improve the lives of people on this planet, the State Department must be in the lead. It cannot be left to generals without diplomats. I believe Congress and this committee in particular must play a central role in guiding America's AI efforts. I hope you will share your thoughts on how you think Congress can accomplish that. Now, recognize our distinguished ranking member, Senator Risch.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The ongoing wars in Europe and the Middle East are reminders of the threats and instability that define the era of strategic competition in which we live. Amidst the images of chaos and destruction splashed across the headlines, yet another competition is arising. New advances in AI will transform the way we live, do business, and interact with the world. These advances also have significant implications for our foreign policy and, importantly, national security. The United States and our allies must lead the world in developing the transformational technologies and the standards that govern them. That will shape the future. If harnessed appropriately, AI-driven algorithms can provide the State Department with real-time data and insights. This includes everything from how effective policies are in different parts of the world to which IT vulnerabilities are most likely to be exploited by an adversary, to which overseas staffing models are most efficient and effective in meeting the department's needs. We must also prepare for the ways our adversaries like Russia, Iran, and particularly China are trying to use AI. AI-powered cyber attacks could overwhelm our defenses by rapidly identifying our vulnerabilities and exploiting them. AI-driven information operations could target government officials or certain segments of the public and confuse, distract, or paralyze the decision-making process. AI-enabled battlefield management systems could give our adversaries a decisive advantage in targeting U.S. forces and striking key weak points. Since AI and machine learning rely on accurate data to work correctly, our adversaries could also deliberately manipulate or corrupt publicly available databases to ensure predictive models or analytics used by the U.S. government don't work properly during a crisis. To respond to both the opportunities and the threats posed by new AI-driven technologies, the State Department should focus on two areas, and I hope our witnesses will be able to talk more about those today. First, we need to work with our allies to set the standards that will govern how AI is used around the world. We need to collaborate on research in key areas and identify the specific national security sensitive technologies that adversaries like China will try to steal or copy, and thereafter develop tougher standards to answer, tougher safeguards to answer those issues. Ambassador Fick, Congress established the Bureau of Cyberspace and Digital Policy, which you lead, in part to spearhead this type of engagement with allies. I look forward to hearing more from you about the work you're doing in this area. I would also like to hear your insights into how AI could transform the cyber threat landscape and what you're doing about that. Second, we need a workforce that not only understands how data and AI and machine learning work, but also how to integrate these tools into their daily work. I'm pleased to see the department begin to pursue a data-driven approach to diplomacy because it has the potential to improve our foreign policy. Using all the information available to make national security decisions is a crucial part in getting to the right answer. Data-driven diplomacy also helps counteract groupthink within the department, which limits options and stifles critical thinking. But data-driven diplomacy can't just be a talking point. The department has to truly commit to integrating data into the policymaking process and changing course, if necessary, when it receives objective feedback that a policy or procedure simply isn't working. The State Department's Center for Data Analytics was established to better integrate data analysis and expertise into foreign policy decision-making and to develop a workforce that possesses the skills needed to take advantage of these technologies. Dr. Gravis, I look forward to hearing more about the progress the Center for Analytics has made in expanding data access and utilization throughout the department. Any insights you have into challenges and obstacles that remain would be greatly appreciated. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Risch, which is most of the cases, our opening statements are very comparable and very similar. So thank you very much for your leadership here, and I look forward to working with you.
You're not suggesting we plagiarize, are you?
No, I'm suggesting we might want to combine some of our staff and save some. No, I'm just. But it's always interesting to hear the opening statement from my colleague. We have two very distinguished witnesses today, Ambassador Fick and Dr. Gravis. I'm going to introduce both of you. Your full statements will be made part of our record. We would ask that you proceed in about 5 minutes so we have time for the members to ask questions and to have a discussion. So first, let me introduce Ambassador Fick, who currently leads the State Department's Bureau of Cyberspace and Digital Policy as the inaugural ambassador at large. Ambassador Fick has taken the reins at a critical moment for strengthening U.S. diplomatic efforts on cyber and digital issues, particularly the rapid development of AI technologies. Prior to his leadership of the CDB Bureau, Ambassador Fick had an extensive career in the private sector as technology executive and entrepreneur. He's also served as a Marine Corps infantry and reconnaissance officer, including combat tours in Afghanistan and Iraq. We thank you for your service to our country in so many different ways. Dr. Gravis has been the department's chief data officer since December 2020. He is recently selected to serve as the department's inaugural chief artificial intelligence officer in a dual-hatted capacity. This also comes at a critical moment as the executive branch agencies react to the development and deployment of artificial intelligence and other data analytical tools. Prior to his leadership of the department's Center for Analytics, Dr. Gravis spent 13 years in leadership positions at the Department of Homeland Security, as well as his time in the private sector. He holds a master's degree in mechanical engineering from Texas A&M University and a doctorate in systems engineering from George Washington University. We'll start with Ambassador Fick.
Good morning, Chairman Cardin, Ranking Member Risch, distinguished members of the committee. On behalf of the Department of State, thank you for the opportunity to speak here today. And more broadly, thank you for your support over the 14 months I've been in this new role. I'm pleased to provide you today with an update on our work in the service of the United States international technology policy priorities, and will speak specifically to our efforts to strengthen U.S. global leadership to unlock the potentials of AI while also addressing its challenges. At the State Department, I oversee the organizations that lead and coordinate the department's work on cyberspace, digital policy, and emerging technologies, and there are two of them: the Bureau of Cyberspace and Digital Policy, known as CDP, and also the Office of the Special Envoy for Critical and Emerging Tech, STEC for short. Building on years of bipartisan work, Secretary of State Blinken established these organizations in partnership with Congress as part of a comprehensive effort to modernize American diplomacy and make technology central to U.S. foreign policy. He gave us a very clear mission: to shape the terms of the technology future and to extend America's industrial and innovation strategy into the international realm. Together, CDP and STEC, with our interagency partners, work to advance U.S. global leadership on topics such as trusted technologies in digital infrastructure, advanced wireless networks, quantum computing, biotechnology and synthetic biology, cloud services and data centers, undersea communications cables, satellite communications, and, yes, AI. We also work to build partner cybersecurity capacity, to strengthen international technical standards, to advance global cyber stability and counter adversaries in cyberspace. And finally, we use technology to promote and protect human rights. An important distinction between my work and the work of my colleague appearing with me today, Dr. Gravis, is that my team focuses on leading U.S. diplomacy on technology topics with external international audiences, while Dr. Gravis's work is focused on AI deployment within the department. As someone who spent a decade building and leading a software business, and after a couple combat tours in the Marines, I do believe very fundamentally that responsible technology innovation is increasingly a foundational source of our geopolitical power. And over the past year, I've seen firsthand how these technologies are transforming every aspect of our societies, from how we work to how we learn to how we communicate, and they're transforming every aspect of our foreign policy. Many traditional measures of national strength, such as GDP or military capacity, are increasingly downstream of a nation's ability to innovate in these key technology areas. So put simply, in geopolitical competition terms, tech is increasingly the game. It's revolutionary, it's accelerating, and the United States must lead, engaging boldly on behalf of our values and our interests. As the President recently said, we stand at an inflection point in history. Nowhere is that more evident than with AI. The decisions that we make today about how we shape the parameters around AI will define the world in so many ways for decades to come. It's a responsibility that we must assume together with our private sector, with civil society, and with our international partners. American companies lead the world in AI innovation, and the United States has increasingly strong momentum domestically to lead in AI governance. The recent executive order on AI directs the most significant action any government anywhere in the world has ever taken on AI safety, security, and trust. And it is the natural next step after having first secured the voluntary commitments that were agreed to by leading AI companies. And the President's committed to working with Congress to craft bipartisan legislation to establish an enduring domestic policy framework. At the same time, we're working internationally with our closest partners to advance our shared views on AI policy. The G7, with strong U.S. leadership and engagement, just released an international code of conduct for AI developers, which draws heavily from the voluntary commitments. I attended the UK's AI Safety Summit 2 weeks ago at Bletchley Park, hallowed ground in the history of technology and national security, and we continue to work to advance shared approaches to AI with European partners through mechanisms including the US-EU Trade and Technology Council. Countries around the world realize that AI is now the foundational technology driving advances that can help solve some of our most pressing shared challenges in science, in energy, in agriculture, in education, and more. And my team's role is to engage with the world in these conversations, to synchronize multi-stakeholder approaches on governance, to harness the benefits of AI, to mitigate its risks, and to do so while always ensuring that our innovation ecosystem remains our North Star. We do this with three orienting principles in mind. First, it's essential for the United States to lead with an affirmative vision for the role of technology in our shared future. We believe in tech's power to accelerate innovation, to solve major global challenges, and to support our future prosperity. Our affirmative vision is reflected in both our engagements and also in our foreign assistance through programs such as AI Connect and other recently announced programs to leverage AI to help reduce poverty, to address energy needs, and to improve global public health. By committing resources to these programs, we were able to secure follow-on investments from the private sector that leveraged our commitment of $15 million, leveraged that commitment several times over to accelerate progress on the Sustainable Development Goals using AI. The U.S. is the world's leader in innovation, and if we don't champion the benefits of technology, who will? That's principle one. Second, we know we must do this work in partnership with others. International partnerships on everything from R&D investment to standards harmonization to regulatory interoperability are the policy underpinnings that are necessary in order to seize this moment. No one can do this alone. No one country, regardless of how big or powerful, no one company, regardless of how advanced. So over the past year, the State Department has been engaged constantly with our allies and with our partners bilaterally and also in multilateral venues like the G7, the G20, the OECD, the United Nations, to achieve tangible commitments on the responsible development, deployment, and use of AI. And through the executive order, the U.S. is leading by example. We're providing a model for the responsible use of this critical technology in our own government, and we're committed to increasing participation in the AI voluntary commitments among leading companies, both in the United States and around the world. Third, we recognize that all of this is happening while a determined and well-resourced set of adversaries and competitors tirelessly advance a very different view of technology's role in our future. They are aggressively trying to reshape the international rules-based order and are investing heavily in a worldview that prioritizes authoritarian tactics over democratic values and governance. Technology governance, and specifically AI governance, is one of the geopolitical imperatives of our time. We need to lead international conversations to shape the global technology landscape of the future so that AI advances democratic values and human rights, protects our safety and our security, and supports our prosperity. When the United States pulls back, our adversaries fill that void. Technology with global impact requires global action. The State Department's delivering on the important work of technology diplomacy for the American people. So thank you again for the opportunity to join you today. I look forward to your questions and your input.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. Dr. Gravis?
Chairman Cardin, Ranking Member Risch, distinguished members of the committee, thank you for this opportunity. I'd like to echo Ambassador Fick's message that we appreciate the committee's effort to understand the role of artificial intelligence both at the department and in our global diplomatic efforts. Serving as the department's first Chief Data and AI Officer, I lead the Center for Analytics. Formally launched in 2020, the Center for Analytics is innovating with, among other things, AI pilots while instilling a culture of responsible AI use across the department. To elevate our collective data and AI proficiency, our stellar team of data scientists and engineers and analysts partner closely with dozens of bureaus, offices, and posts across the department. Our work delivers on the President's executive order on safe, secure, and trustworthy AI, which emphasizes the transformative potential of AI in government. Just last week, the Secretary released the department's first ever enterprise AI strategy. This strategy will provide our world-class diplomatic corps with advanced AI governance and analytics, training, and infrastructure to prepare them both for enduring and emerging policy challenges. As Ambassador Fick noted, our technology leadership is stronger when we set a compelling example. With that, I'd like to share 4 important insights from our journey thus far. First, at State, we see a booming demand for data and AI services across the department. Over the past 3 years, the Center for Analytics has received over 350 project requests from all corners of the department. Some of them promote foreign policy objectives, while others bring about operational efficiencies. Second, on the talent front, we're positioning federal data science skills as close to the mission as possible. Our efforts range from hiring data scientists to offering extensive AI-related training for department employees at all levels. Third, we're already elevating our diplomacy and enhancing operational efficiencies. We're not starting from scratch. For example, by including a data scientist at COP27 last year, the U.S. delegation had access to real-time modeling on other countries' proposed policy changes, which elevate our country's negotiation position. As another example, one of our partner bureaus, the Bureau of Conflict Stabilization Operations, employs computer vision to document war crimes in Ukraine using satellite imagery. In another area, the Bureau of International Organization Affairs employs AI to better strategize our approach within the United Nations, both on elections and votes, resolutions. These examples show how data and AI augment our diplomatic capabilities. We also use AI as a force multiplier to increase operational efficiencies. An example is the statutorily required declassification process. Traditionally a resource-intensive manual task, the declassification process is now accelerated by machine learning, achieving over 97% accuracy and reducing human effort by 60%. And last but not least, our AI advancements must rest on a firm foundation of sound and responsible policy and governance. To achieve this, we formulated the department's first AI policy, updated our AI use case inventory, and launched an AI toolkit. We've also appointed a responsible AI official and initiated an AI steering committee to focus on upholding AI principles and federal guidance. As AI continues to evolve, our commitment to responsible AI use remains unwavering. As we promote a vision of responsible AI globally, the department must and will lead by example. Secretary Blinken believes that our workforce is more equipped to lead globally when provided with timely, relevant data. AI enhances this data's power, unlocking our workforce's utmost potential. We are committed to harnessing AI's potential, and we're committed to doing it in a manner that's safe, secure, and trustworthy. Thank you for your attention. I'm eager to address your questions and collaborate on the promising future of responsible AI at the State Department.
Well, thank you again, both of you, for your testimony. We'll go through 5-minute rounds. Mr. Ambassador, you pointed out that America is the leader in innovation and technology, and we accept that, but I don't want to be naive about it. And Dr. Gravis, you're talking about how you're implementing it in our own use in our department. But we've seen this before. We've led in technology development, only to see the autocratic regimes that don't play by the same rules that we do try to steal our information. And although we will proceed with both on cyber and on AI within our values, our adversaries do not share that commitment to our values. So there are lots of tools in our toolkit. Executive orders that you've already mentioned, and the executive orders and treaties. I am just interested as to how you see the standards being developed. You talked about voluntary standards by what we do. That works up to a point, but we know that the PRC is not going to be as nice as we are in the protocols and adhering to standards. So where do we go as far as establishing international guardrails? Are we looking at just America leading through example, or are we looking at more enforceable ways to establish international guardrails?
Thank you, Senator. Let me share a perspective on that and try to highlight a handful of things. First, we started with the voluntary commitments for two reasons. First, voluntary, by definition, on the part of the companies, does not constrain innovation. And again, we're in a race with our geopolitical adversaries, and we cannot afford to hamstring our innovative competitive advantage. So voluntary equals innovation. Voluntary also equals speed. The voluntary commitments are not intended to be the last step in our domestic or our international governance structure. They're a first step. And they do a couple of things. They allow us to build international consensus around a fairly robust set of commitments on AI safety, security, and trust. Safety means ensuring that the models don't return the most dangerous results. Security means ensuring the cybersecurity and other integrity of the models themselves. And trust means helping to ensure that users, the consumer, can distinguish between AI-generated content and not AI-generated content.
So that's fine for our allies that we have a relationship with, but the autocratic competitors we have, whether it be PRC, whether it be Russia, whether it be North Korea, they're not following those guidelines. So what protections are you negotiating that will provide either incentives or disincentives for those who want to violate international protocols?
Yeah, I'll give you three things. First, when you're running a race, sometimes it's important to simply run faster than your competitor. So that's our innovation prioritization. So speed is one answer to your question. A second is trying to constrain adversaries who have a wildly different view of the role of technology in our future via mechanisms like export controls on our most advanced semiconductors. That is a small yard, high fence approach in order to help keep the most capable enabling technology of AI out of the hands of our adversaries. And then third is a robust global engagement to shape the norms of responsible state behavior in these critical technology areas so that our adversaries can either abide by those norms or put themselves and their behavior outside the norms. We're under no naive illusion that our adversaries are going to comply with our norms. But building a broad coalition, setting the normative example, at least puts our adversaries outside that framework. So then we have the legitimacy and the moral authority to call them out on it.
I just point out we've gone through a series of congressional actions encouraging administrations, sometimes requiring administrations, to take affirmative action against bad players internationally. We call them sanctions, we call them other issues. That's pretty direct when we're dealing with specific actions that are being taken, kinetic actions. It may not be as easy to determine with the use of AI tools, but if an adversary is not identifying the source or using it for disinformation that undermines America's national security, we're going to have more direction on how we can assist, or we may have to try to do that on our own. So any help that you can give us as to how America can not only lead in the race, we want to be first in the race, but to prevent adversaries from taking us in the wrong direction or stealing our information. With that, let me turn it over to Senator Risch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I I'm going to follow along the same lines that the chairman did, and that is that, if you think back, probably some decades ago, some congressional committee was holding a hearing just like this, saying, what are we going to do about this new thing called the internets, as George Bush called them? How are we going to police it? How are we going to because it has tremendous possibility, but there's evilness that can arise from the use of it, et cetera. And frankly, after listening to you, I suspect probably we're in no different position here, and that is, whenever you talk about voluntary, anybody here think that China or Russia are going to voluntarily comply with any international norms when they think it's in their best interest to do otherwise? I mean, you got a country like Russia that can't even obey the simplest mandate of the United Nations not to abuse one of your neighbors. China, look at them as to what they do with international norms, or as we call them, on technology and patent and protection of those kinds of things. I mean, it's just stunning that they have no boundaries. It's just the Wild West out there, and so I guess Ambassador and Dr. Gravis, if you'd comment for a minute on are we right that we're probably barking up the wrong tree if we talk in these esoteric terms about voluntariness and goodness and kindness? Are we in the same place with this as as we have found ourselves with the internet? Why don't you start? If you'd start, Ambassador.
Thanks, Senator. And just one point of clarification. The voluntary commitments are voluntary on the part of the companies. So these are the leading AI developers in the world subscribing to these commitments and committing their companies to the responsible development of AI.
I'm assuming that you're going to want that to flow over to
we want international
sovereigns.
We want businesses around the world to support the commitments, and then we want the commitments to become the basis of codes and frameworks for governments. And please understand, we're not naive about whether our adversaries will voluntarily comply. I think we need to confront an uncomfortable reality in the software era, which is that controlling access to these technologies is somewhere between very difficult and impossible. If an isolated and impoverished North Korea under strong sanction could develop nuclear weapons, I would suggest that the development of sophisticated software capability is a lot easier than that.
Good point.
And so, unfortunately, I do come back to our greatest source of strength being maintaining our innovative advantage, running faster, stewarding our competitive innovation ecosystem, putting export controls and other sanctions in place on adversaries where we think it can be effective, and trying to shape the global normative framework governing these technologies.
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Dr. Gravis, maybe you could take a crack at what the AI police are going to look like.
I can speak to what we're doing within the State Department. That's my remit, is focusing on internal, so I'll stick with that.
Fair disclaimer.
Just to point out, we have the ability to set policy, and we have the ability to set policy quickly within the department, and that's the first element. And so we've already established an AI policy. We've brought on board a responsible AI official whose job is to be laser focused on the ethical and responsible use of AI. She has brought on a test and evaluation team, a red teamer. She's got these kind of capabilities on her team to provide independent assessments, independent evaluations of AI that we onboard in the department. So we have that policy lens, and then we also have that independent look that we're focused on. And we balance that with the opportunities. There's a lot of repetitive work that is done all over the world by our diplomats, and so we have to move swiftly, and we have to move smartly.
Well, thank you. I guess it's going to be interesting to see how this develops, because I suspect that when the internet started, probably people were a lot more optimistic that there was going to be compliance, and you wouldn't have sovereigns actually and intentionally interfering with other people's elections as they do today. It'll be interesting to see how this develops, and unfortunately, like I said, where you can't get countries to behave themselves in public, how are you going to get them to behave themselves in a laboratory with the door closed and locked and nobody looking? So it'll be interesting to see how that develops, and I have no doubt that you'll follow it closely. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Risch. Let me just caution, we'll be patient to wait for your recommendations as to how we can protect those that are not following guardrails. But the next person I'm going to call on, if it wasn't for his action in regards to Iran, we may still be waiting for some executive actions. Senator Menendez.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. President Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping are set to meet today during the APEC summit to discuss a number of issues, including the role of artificial intelligence in nuclear weapons. When I think about this topic, I worry that some country would give the decision as to whether or not to launch a nuclear weapon to artificial intelligence, thinking that it may be the most astute way to make a calculus. But for me, that would be alarming. There have been press reports that the United States and the PRC will pledge to limit the use of AI in nuclear weapons systems. Ambassador Fisk, can you share with us why an agreement on these issues with a country like China is significant? Is this a model that the administration plans to expand to other willing countries?
Thank you, Senator. I am serving at the State Department in part because of my formative experience in the Marines in my 20s, which left me with a conviction that diplomacy is and must always be the nation's tool of first resort. And so I welcome the conversation between Presidents Biden and Xi. I welcome communication between us and all countries at all times. That does not mean we agree. It does not equal collaboration, but the communication in and of itself is valuable and is better than the alternative. With respect to the military uses of AI, I would point to the political declaration for the responsible use of AI, a military-focused framework of principles that rights-respecting countries have subscribed to. It's a good example of the kinds of behaviors that we want to become the global norm. Again, we are under no illusion that our adversaries will abide by those norms in every case. But I think that the channel of communication in itself is valuable.
I have no doubt about the communications. I agree with you totally. I've been advocating for that so that we have lines of communication, particularly for non-conflict issues in China. But my question is really going to, do we want to extend an understanding, an agreement as to how or whether or not even AI should be used at all, particularly in terms of nuclear launches, as well as how do we ensure, because China's growing their nuclear capabilities dramatically, how do we ensure that even if a country signs on to that, have we thought about the enforcement mechanisms of that?
I think one of the foundational principles of the political declaration is a belief that when we're talking about lethal systems of any kind, there needs to be a human in the loop. We can't have fully machine-enabled or AI-enabled lethal systems. And your question about the inspection mechanism and the enforcement mechanism is, of course, exactly the right one. I would have to refer to colleagues elsewhere in the department who have that piece within their remit.
All right. China has introduced some of the earliest and most detailed regulations governing artificial intelligence over the last 2 years. Our own allies, including the European Union, have also begun cooperating on developing regimes to govern the proliferation of AI. And while I applaud these engagements on global AI governance, more must be done in this area of strategic competition if we are to keep up with China's efforts to regulate AI and provide an alternate vision for AI that embraces human rights, privacy, and other values we hold so dear. What are some of the troubling implications if America and our allies fail to develop a consensus around regulating AI, and we allow China to pioneer the rules of AI globally?
I would make 2 points there in response to your question, Senator. First, our foreign policy in any area will rarely be any stronger than our domestic policy in that area. American foreign policy, I think the foreign policy in any transparent democratic society is a reflection of what we do at home. And so we do need to get our own house in order with respect to the regulation and governance of these emerging technologies so that we are presenting on the world stage a responsible framework for governance that has legitimacy and moral authority. Second, there's no room here for one of the concepts that even our closest European allies advocate, which is digital sovereignty. I would argue we need to think about digital solidarity. We have to think about close collaboration with our closest allies and partners to coordinate R&D investment, to coordinate regulatory interoperability. Companies want large harmonized markets. We need the combined integrated efforts of our best universities, of our students and workers. So it points to the importance of our domestic regulatory regime. It also points to the importance of our allies and partnerships in order to both shape the international normative environment and also present the strongest unified front against the PRC model.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I'm going to just submit a question for the record since my time has expired, but I'd like really a responsive answer to it. This is the 10th anniversary of the Rana Plaza factory collapse in Bangladesh, took the lives of over 1,000 workers. In this AI industry, workers are being exploited, paid as little as $1 an hour, going through the repetitive process of trying to determine what's a smile, what's a frown, to inform the algorithms. I would like to see us lead in this regard to make sure that we don't have worker exploitation globally in the development of AI. I'd like to see what the department is doing in that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'd be interested in that answer also. As I mentioned, we need to lead by our values. Senator Ricketts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses here today. Ambassador Fick, I want to build on what Senator Menendez was talking about with regard to the EU specifically. Obviously, we've talked about the different sorts of regimes, regulatory regimes that different countries around the world are trying to establish. We talked about the PRC. We've talked about what we've done with regard to the executive order and the voluntary guidelines you talked about. And then, of course, we've got the European Union, where they have been working on their own legislation. They proposed the AI Act a couple of years ago, and it involves a risk-based approach. But as you know, the European Union will often come up with these standards, and then companies will really adopt those for their worldwide products to try and standardize their products and make it easier to have access both to the market in Europe and around the world. But if you have if I understand the legislation is coming to its final phases, they haven't figured out the generative AI part of it. But assuming that gets passed, companies will be forced to make the decision of either complying with the EU does or creating completely different algorithms that don't access the EU data, and then having to deal with the difficulties of that as well. So my question really gets to, if we've got these EU regulatory constraints, you talked about cooperating with our allies, but they're moving forward on this legislation. I think you've been critical of this legislation. What effect, if the EU passes their AI Act, will that have on the United States and our other allies? And is this going to potentially put a damper on that innovation you've talked about that's so important among U.S. companies?
Thank you, Senator. Yes, we've been in regular dialogue with our EU counterparts, both member states and the European Commission, on the substance of the AI Act. I would make three points on this. The first is speed. As you pointed out, the act was first drafted before ChatGPT was released a year ago. And so in some sense, it's already been overtaken by events, which points to
already obsolete, essentially.
A structural challenge with that kind of regulatory approach. It also, as currently drafted, would hinder law enforcement cooperation between the United States and the EU. Things like the use of facial recognition technology at borders or by law enforcement. And third, we hear repeatedly from companies and innovators, not only in the United States, but also in Europe, that it is not adequately protective of intellectual property. It would deter entrepreneurs from building AI businesses in Europe. And back to this point on digital solidarity, the future that we think positions us most strongly for competition with our adversaries is one where we have globe-spanning technology businesses being built not only in the United States, but also in our closest and rights-respecting allies and partners in Europe and in Asia.
Well, for all those reasons you just talked about, how we want to be working with our allies in Europe, and yet they are pushing forward with this, frankly, it's already obsolete now, right? Or at least it's not complete legislation. What is the State Department doing to get them to maybe to slow this down, to be able to work with us more carefully, to create that regime you're talking about where we can be on the same team with regard to pushing back against the People's Republic of China and not creating an obstacle to us working together to oppose them?
We're pushing in every forum on this, multilaterally and bilaterally. I'll give you 3 examples. Over the last 3 weeks, I met with the German communications minister who has oversight of these policies in Germany when he was here in Washington. It was at Bletchley Park. Most of our EU counterparts were there. And last week I was in France with President Macron himself and the French digital minister, making exactly these cases that the continental Europe, in a lot of ways, regulated itself out of the cloud services era of technology. It's no accident that the 5 largest global cloud services businesses are here in the United States. It would be to our mutual detriment if the EU were to regulate its way out of the AI era of technology innovation. So we're pushing on this in every forum.
Okay, and then you just said you were at Bletchley Park. How are the Brits seeing this? What is the UK policy going to be, and where are they going? Are they more leaning toward the European model? Are they leaning more toward our model?
Prime Minister Sunak and his government are leaning very strongly toward our model. I think we and our British allies are very close on this. They intend to set themselves up as an AI superpower, in their words, which we view as very much to our benefit as well.
Yeah. Great. Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Ambassador. Mr. Chairman, thanks.
Thank you. Senator Shaheen?
Thank you both for being here. Ambassador Fick, in your opening statement, and you mentioned an alphabet soup of multilateral organizations that we were looking at, you didn't mention NATO. And while I recognize that NATO is not technically part of the State Department or within the purview of the State Department, certainly what they do is very important. So was there a reason, and what are you looking at with respect to NATO?
Senator Shaheen, I joke with my wife sometimes that we should get an apartment in Brussels because I'm at NATO so much, especially in the context of the war in Ukraine in the past year. Our ambassador to NATO, Julie Smith, is a dear friend, and we collaborate very closely on these topics. I think that NATO is a terrific example of what Secretary Blinken talks about as variable geometry and making sure that our most important alliances historically are fit for purpose in the technology age. And so a really key element of our diplomacy with NATO and in Europe has been ensuring that the alliance is equipped on all of these technology topics. Cybersecurity. At the Vilnius Summit in July, we saw a robust set of deliverables on the virtual cyber incident support capability, the revitalization of the NATO Cyber Defense Pledge. We've been working with allies across the alliance to ensure that their own architecture and infrastructure is secure and trusted so that we can share information and intelligence freely across the alliance. So that was not an error of commission in not mentioning NATO in my opening comments. I think in technology, the NATO alliance is one of our leading partners globally on all of these topics.
Good, thank you. As everybody has talked about so far, AI has tremendous potential in so many areas, but it can also perpetuate existing biases and inequities. So how does the department look at how we ensure that those inequities aren't part of whatever is done through AI, particularly with respect to gender, with respect to the whole range of ethnic, racial differences that we want to respect?
Thank you, Senator, for the question. I'll make a few points here. One is it starts with training, leveling up the literacy when it comes to data, when it comes to AI, when it comes to algorithms across the department, so we understand that this is a possibility. The second is using good data. Good AI rides on good data at the end of the day. And so the focus of ours is to how do we bring this kind of technology into our department in a secure infrastructure and apply this technology on data that we manage, data that we can ensure the quality of. That's the second point. And the third has to do with our partnership with industry, which is really focused on the procurement process. How do we ensure that software procurement includes the right policies and requirements to make sure that our industry partners are providing technologies that are free of those types of biases you mentioned.
Great. I want to be a little more parochial now. In my office, the number one constituent issue we hear from people about are visas, passports, challenges with our immigration system. Yes, and the State Department, particularly during COVID, had some real issues in countries around the world in terms of processing those kinds of issues. So tell me how AI is going to help us make sure we can process those kinds of constituent concerns faster so that we can provide service to people who need it.
The passport organization within Consular Affairs isn't using artificial intelligence at this time, so.
I know they're in New Hampshire, or at least one of them is, so we're very aware of that.
We'll make that point first. More broadly, we see this as a real opportunity to reduce the type of repetitive rote work that happens across the department, both domestically and overseas. We're taking a very pilot-centric approach, starting small, learning a lot, scaling where it works, and we've seen some real success with that approach.
And so, assuming that you continue to see success, what do you need in order to ramp that up? Do you need resources? Do you need more people? Do you just need the IP to share those with our embassies around the world?
I'm a systems engineer, so you know what goes in can increase the output. So in my mind, it's resources in terms of infrastructure and in terms of personnel, right? It's people without the actual technology, without the data to be able to employ it aren't going to get very far, and technology without the skilled workforce that we're currently aggressively trying to bring into the federal employment within the State Department, you know, you got to have both.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I assure you, Senator Shaheen has the support of every member of this committee on consular services to be streamlined and made more timely. It would make our life a lot easier, I assure you of that. Senator Brasso?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. For either of you who want to address this, I have with me today the principal and a number of teachers who are here from the Southside Elementary School, Powell, Wyoming. They're a blue ribbon school, one of only two in the state of Wyoming, and they're here for the national celebration of their achievements, and this has to do with AI, TikTok. So whoever wants to answer, because reports do indicate that that TikTok is harvesting vast amounts of data from millions of users in the United States, many of whom are students. It's owned by a company based in Beijing. Although TikTok executives deny it, many experts believe that the Chinese government has access to TikTok's American user data. So the question is, do you believe that TikTok is using data collected from its application to feed Chinese artificial intelligence, the machine learning algorithms, and what the implications are for us here at home and for students all around the country?
Thanks, Senator. A couple of points on that. I would point out, of course, that the administration has enacted a ban on the installation of TikTok on federal devices, which should speak to, I think, our perspective on the risk involved. And the second observation, I am probably the least popular father in my daughter's middle school because of my personal views on this point. And my request to you would be that that we try to speak with one voice as a country, that we adopt a position via a democratic process that acknowledges what you have said.
Yeah. Anything you'd like to add on that?
Thank you, Senator. I would say we're worried about our data too at the State Department. How do we ensure that that our employees are not putting sensitive information out out on the web. And so we have existing policies in place that need to be reinforced, and training and literacy has to go along with that. And then we need to move aggressively to onboard this kind of technology into the infrastructure that we micromanage, that we have tight security controls on, and that we're constantly monitoring.
Thank you. Mr. Fick, China continues to infiltrate top U.S. companies, laboratories, universities, to, I believe, steal valuable American intellectual property. The impact on the economy is massive. The Chinese Communist Party clearly attempting to surpass America in terms of our economic strength, military strength, international influence. So a senior FBI official had said earlier this year, nation-state adversaries, particularly China, pose a significant threat to American companies and national security by stealing our AI technology and data to advance their own AI programs and enable foreign influence campaigns. How do you assess the threat of China's increasingly adversarial government to the United States?
Senator, I certainly agree with that assessment that intellectual property theft by the PRC has stripped critical competitive advantage out of the U.S. economy for several decades now. Our response to that, or uneven response to that, has put us in a deterrent hole. And there's a very real threat to the security of our most advanced AI systems going forward. It's why one of the pillars in the voluntary commitments is the security pillar, which is standards around cybersecurity testing, disclosure of testing results for our most advanced frontier models, and a very real shared focus by the government and these companies on safeguarding that aspect of our innovative advantage.
And then final question, since Senator Risch started by talking about the leadership that we've taken in the United States when it came to the internet years and years ago. We led in this sector because we chose to take a kind of a light-handed regulatory approach. A number of us in the Senate have met with, we've had discussions on AI. We had Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, a number of the leaders in the technology there. Do you believe that a light-handed regulatory structure, or a heavy-handed structure, if you will, is best for promoting American leadership and innovation in artificial intelligence and the machine learning technology?
Senator, I've been in this job for a year, but I spent a dozen years before that building a software business and investing in software businesses, and I believe very strongly in the power of our innovation economy as our greatest source of national strength. I said in my opening statement that many traditional measures of strength, like GDP and military capacity, are increasingly downstream of our ability to innovate in these technologies. So I do think there's a role for appropriate regulation of such powerful tech, and I think our North Star must be maintaining the health of that innovation economy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Barrasso, thank you for bringing the students here today. I think the students should know that Senator Barrasso is one of our leaders in the United States Senate, but his role here on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee is invaluable. He's a great member of our committees. And as Dr. Gravis has said, there's a career at the State Department in AI, so applications will be given out shortly. So thank you for being here. We appreciate it very much. Senator Van Hollen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank both of you for your testimony and for your service. And I know we've covered a lot of ground today, including some of the questions that I was going to ask. So I just wanted to affirm a couple of principles, Ambassador Fick, that I know you've outlined, not just this morning, but earlier, which is in order that part of our overall digital and data strategy has to be to promote American innovation, support American values, including promoting human rights. Would you agree?
Yes.
And you would agree, I think, that authoritarian regimes fear the open flow of information and data and try to put up walls and barriers against it, right?
I agree.
And would you agree that one of the mechanisms they use to do it is to try to promote data localization requirements around the world so that those governments can sometimes spy on their people and look for dissenters?
We see an increasing balkanization of the free and open internet.
So here's my question, because we have a unified executive branch. Were you consulted when the USTR decided to back away from the e-commerce principles at the WTO. Were you consulted as part of that decision?
I read about the decision in the press, Senator.
And I know what your earlier testimony, one of the things that struck me when you were up for your nomination was that you were a straight shooter. Would you agree that that decision undermines the principles you and I just discussed about an open internet and not allowing authoritarian regimes to more easily spy and crack down on dissent?
We advocate in every forum for the benefits of an internet that is free and open and interoperable and reliable and secure, and that includes the free flow of data.
I appreciate that, and I understand that you're here not just as a State Department representative, but part of an administration. But I appreciate that answer, because I can tell you that, in my view, that what the USTR did and at the WTO was totally undermine the principles that we just talked about. Free flow of information, stepping back from our resistance to data localization, which empowers authoritarian regimes, as well as our efforts to prevent forced tech transfer. Those were all principles that we had advocated for. And it's my belief that when we back away from that, we lose our credibility around the world, not just on these issues, but on the issues that you two gentlemen have to work on every day. Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to submit for the record a letter that a group of us wrote to President Biden on this issue.
Without objection.
Thank you. So on the issue of AI, of course, one of the big issues is, and I think it's been discussed a little bit already this morning, the issue of international standard setting committees. And there are many, but there are a number of key ones. How would you evaluate the current U.S. Presence, participation, influence in those committees? And I'd start with Ambassador Fick and then hear from Dr. Gravis.
May I just ask for clarification on which committees, Senator? Which
Well,
organizations?
There's the International Standard Setting Committee being one of them. There's one on electrical standards. So those are...
Okay, yes, I understand.
Yeah.
Standards harmonization is one of the foundational pieces of building an innovation ecosystem across national boundaries that can bring to bear shared R&D, shared innovation, more than the companies of any one business. So we are strongly engaged in those international standard setting bodies to help ensure that the standards are aligned with our values, that promote shared prosperity, and that they, looking ahead now to the AI era, that we adopt a similarly legitimate, broadly consensus-based approach to harmonizing standards.
I appreciate that. I think the major ones for the purposes of AI, I think, are ISO, the IEC, and the ITU, but there may be others. And I think, as you know, the PRC and others have been very actively engaged in trying to increase their presence and participation. It's been one of America's strength that we've led that effort, and I know you both are committed to doing that. I don't know, Dr. Gravis, if you have anything to add to that question.
Sure, happy to. A couple of things, Senator. First is within the federal government starts with the National Institute of Standards and Technologies. That's the who is setting the guardrails around what standards are expected to be followed across the federal government. Also on the cyber security side, Cyber Infrastructure Security Agency within DHS. At the State Department, as I just said, AI rides on good data. We've been doing data standards for the last several years. It's not the flashiest part of the work, but it's necessary, and I think it's great that you're talking about that. Also, I'll point out that the International Organizational Affairs Bureau, IO Bureau within the State Department, has their own chief data officer. It's part of a program that we've been leading to place data leaders in each bureau. And she's focused on analytics related to elections, try to get Americans in the right committees who are setting these kind of standards, and that's really important too. So it's a great example of how we apply technology, how do we apply AI in the department to impact on a global stage diplomatically.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I just want to comment briefly in introducing Senator Kaine. Make it clear, Mr. Ambassador, we strongly support diplomacy in dealing with these issues. Our questions are really aimed at seeing how we can make sure you have the resources, the tools, and sometimes the direction you need for diplomacy to be successful. And we're very fortunate on this committee to have our own ambassador to the Department of Defense. Let me explain that. Senator Kaine serves on this committee and the Armed Services Committee, so we have our representative with DOD to promote diplomacy. Senator Kaine.
Mr. Chairman, you anticipated my line of questioning, because what I want to talk about is something that's at the intersection of the Foreign Relations Committee jurisdiction and the Armed Services Committee jurisdiction, and that's the AUKUS partnership. So President Biden announced the AUKUS partnership with Australia and the UK a couple years back. It has been fleshed out. Last summer, the administration came to us to ask for enabling legislation to move the partnership forward. They thought it was going to be in the Armed Services Committee, but when I told them, no, all this comes through the Foreign Relations Committee, they said, well, good, you're on both. Can you help out? And Senator Cardin has been key to this as well. The partnership has two pillars. The first pillar is the construction over a period of about 25 years of nuclear subs that would be Australian operated and eventually Australian built to provide additional stability in the Indo-Pacific. And just for my colleagues, I was at a Navy-funded workforce training school in Danville, Virginia on Monday that the Navy has stood up to build out the submarine industrial base. There's 60 students go through in 5 different curriculum areas for an 8-week program, and multiple students in each of the 5 programs were from Australia. So they were not only from all over the United States, but Aussies are already training to be part of the sub-industrial base. And Aussie sailors are now part of the nuclear power school that the Navy operates in South Carolina. So even though the first subs are not going to be purchased until the 2030s or built in Australia until the 2040s, we are integrating. The second piece of AUKUS is Pillar 2, which is innovative technologies, quantum, undersea capabilities, but also AI. And I'd like to ask your own impressions about what we can do together with Australia and the UK in the Pillar 2 space to really maximize and the synergies of us working together on AI capacity that can help us in the defense of the Indo-PACOM.
Thank you, Senator. Happy to address that. I think that my overarching view here is maybe reflected in the way Senator Blinken talks about alliances and partnerships that are fit for purpose, the variable geometry of our alliances and our partnerships, and pulling on the right partners in the right fora at the right time to accomplish our highest priorities. This is a good example. Specifically, in the innovative technology pillar for AUKUS, I'll point to one thing that we announced just a few weeks ago during the Australian Prime Minister's visit. I've been working closely with Ambassador Kennedy on this for months, and that is partnership on undersea cables connecting Pacific Island countries. And what's interesting here, I wish Senator Shaheen were still here, because one of the world's leading manufacturers of undersea cables is in New Hampshire. And so we have a national champion in the United States in this regard. And we have an opportunity now to lay trusted cable to connect Australia and the United States, but also to link together other key strategic geographies in the Pacific, and do it in a way that is part of a vertically integrated technology stack. So let me just explain for a moment what I mean. The cables as the baseline connectivity. Those cables are essential for the data backhaul if we were eventually to build data centers, say, in Australia, so that key countries across the Pacific could migrate their government enterprise to the cloud, could ensure continuity of communication and continuity of operations in the event of a contingency scenario, and then put top-notch, cutting-edge cybersecurity on top of those data centers. So again, a layered approach of trusted cables, trusted data centers, and advanced cybersecurity. So that's what we're in the early stages of doing in partnership with Australia and others in the region. I think it's really exciting, and it's a template that we ought to be able to replicate now in other geographies.
My colleagues asked questions earlier that led you to talk about some of the different approaches that the EU is taking, for example, compared to the United States, and the hope that the UK would be more aligned with the US in terms of AI regulation, less centralized, possibly. My hope would be that as we're having those discussions with the UK, we also keep Australia in mind, because I think if we're going to make this Pillar 2 part of AUKUS successful, the greatest alignment between the US and UK and Australia on matters like AI regulation would be helpful. I hope we might be able to convince the EU to come more of our way as well. But if you have any thoughts about the Australian approach to AI regulation, I'd love to hear them, but at least I would like to encourage that we include Australia in the discussions that we're having with the UK around alignment.
I agree completely, Senator. I was at Bletchley Park for the UK AI Safety Summit a couple of weeks ago. At the end of the summit, we released the Bletchley communique. Australia is a signatory there, and so I think we're fully aligned.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Young.
Well, thank you, Chairman, for holding this very important hearing. I thank our witnesses for your service. It's such an important topic we're all dealing with in various ways. I'll dive right in. Ambassador Fick, I have a number of questions for you. I ask that you keep your responses as tight as possible so we can get through them. As we think about harmonizing AI policies and R&D between partners and allies, can you speak, Ambassador, to the importance of forging clear and enforceable digital trade rules that will ensure the regulated flow of data across international boundaries that may enable future AI and machine learning systems, and which have to entail necessary cross-border privacy protections? There's a possibility that a failure to reach these sorts of rules, an agreement on the rules, may jeopardize AI collaboration and cooperation. Ambassador, do you believe it would be to America's advantage to prioritize digital trade in our multilateral and bilateral trade negotiations? Not a trick question.
Thanks, Senator. And I was at Purdue a few weeks ago in Indiana.
Yeah.
And let me just say that Keith Kroc, who's endowed a Center for Tech Diplomacy at Purdue, in many ways was my predecessor with this portfolio, and put the markers down on some essential topics, and we've tried to carry that work forward. Yes, in a word, I think that harmonizing data flows and prioritizing digital trade in our international trade agenda is an important component of American competitiveness in the 21st century.
How do we get there?
Through a series of bilateral and multilateral negotiations that result in outcomes like the US-EU data privacy framework. There's no silver bullet here. I think it's a lot of hard-fought diplomacy bilaterally and multilaterally.
I agree with you. And I know others in the administration agree with that perspective as well, because trade is at once, it's a vehicle for upward mobility, for prosperity, but also for forging tighter relationships among countries and regions. And I think it's very important that everyone in the administration regard it as such. So we'll continue to work on the Finance Committee and the Foreign Relations Committee on the topic of digital trade. Ambassador, can you speak to how your Bureau is approaching the use of artificial intelligence in converging technologies, like synthetic biology, especially in gene synthesis and gene editing, as you promote the responsible adoption of artificial intelligence?
I think the simplest answer to that question, Senator, is that we have seen the PRC run what we now call the Huawei playbook in telecom. It is a series of has a series of elements: IP theft, subsidies. That playbook, that rough template, is now being run by the PRC across a whole host of other emerging technologies, including synthetic biology.
All right. Thank you. There is much congressional discussion, Ambassador, around the regulation of artificial intelligence. As the chairman was kind to acknowledge earlier, I've been pretty involved in many of those conversations. And much of what we discussed has centered on whether we can use existing statutes and regulations for specific use cases of artificial intelligence. I think this is probably the approach our country will take on a going forward basis. But this same sort of debate about how conceptually you approach AI regulation extends to the global harmonization of policies across countries, across regions. There have been countless forums already, and I think that's a good thing, to discuss artificial intelligence, from the G7 to the EU, to a recent conclave on safety as it pertains to frontier models. That was in the UK. And making sense of how our country is going to approach harmonization can sometimes be complicated and confusing. So from your vantage point, Ambassador, how is the department approaching this question of global harmonization? Is the intention to pursue action through existing multilateral institutions, or instead to convene special multilateral conventions or pursue bilateral agreements? And then in any harmonization effort, what role do you envision the U.S. private sector actors are going to play?
Thanks, Senator. Yes, just in the last 10 days, we've seen 4 strands come together. We've seen the AI Code of Conduct for developers at the G7, the American Executive Order, the Bletchley Convening and Communique, and the AI Act, the EU AI Act, in trilogue negotiation. So we have this dynamic policy landscape, and our overarching next step is to try to drive these to convergence in some sort of a comprehensive policy framework that's going to be to the advantage of rights-respecting allies and partners, the U.S., the EU, the Japanese, the Australians, South Koreans, and as inclusive as possible of middle ground states that are willing to subscribe to a rights-respecting use of these technologies.
So you haven't settled, just by way of follow-up, you haven't settled on a particular format. You haven't identified who will sit in the individual seats around a table as you try and harmonize different policies. Is that accurate? I'm not asking this critically.
Sure.
But as an important investigative matter by this committee.
I think there are 2 basic approaches we could take.
Yeah.
One approach would be to form a new group, T12, a T15, a T18, an alliance of techno-democracies, if you will.
Okay.
That's been in the press, in think tank world, it's been a subject of discussion. The other general approach is to use the alliances and the partnerships that we have, or to create new ones and make sure they're fit for purpose. Senator Sheen's question about NATO, Senator Kane's question about AUKUS. My view, and the view of the department, the view of the secretary, is that we should do the latter, that we should be using organizations that exist. We shouldn't be setting up new secretariats with overhead, creating new sets of meetings for people to attend. We should be using existing organizations. We should be ensuring that they're fit for purpose, and we should be making sure that technology issues and AI governance are threaded through all of them.
Okay. I very much hope that you will keep myself and other members of this committee informed of developments as it pertains to who you'll be convening, when you'll be convening them. I hope it's not in the very distant future. That is the first quarter or 2 of next year, and what you anticipate the agenda looking like.
And Senator, if I may, you asked a question about the private sector. I think it's important to address it.
Yes, sir.
So the private sector has been front and center in these discussions from day one, starting with the voluntary commitments of the White House. They've been involved in every multi-stakeholder consultation in the G7 and the G20 and other fora. They were present in force at Bletchley Park, widely consulted on the EO. Again, back to the point that the bulk of the innovative horsepower in our economy sits in the private sector, the bulk of our talents in the private sector, the bulk of the attack surface we care about protecting is in the private sector. This only works if it's truly a multi-stakeholder process involving governments, companies, and civil society and other organizations.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you, Chairman, for your patience.
And let me again acknowledge that Senator Young has been instrumental in bringing together the top experts, basically in the world, on AI in a nonpartisan environment where we can really absorb and try to understand where we are today, where we are heading, and what are our options and what are our needs. So thank you very much for that help. Appreciate it very much. Senator Risch, anything further?
Good, thank you.
Let me thank our witnesses. Let me just underscore the point. We recognize this is not just a governmental exercise. It's the private sector as well. But the private sector also needs to have guardrails and needs to be protected. So that's why the global rules are incredibly important for how the United States leads in establishing those global rules, not only for state actors, but also for private companies. This conversation will continue. We anticipate there's going to be legislative action throughout 2024 in regards to AI to try to get a handle on appropriate guardrails and to give us the tools so we can continue to lead in innovation, but also in the responsible use of AI. So thank you both for your contributions, and we look forward to the continuation. The record will remain open through close of business on Friday. For members who may have questions for the record, we would ask that you respond in a timely way. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
The hearing is adjourned.